Good afternoon. I am talking today about the second part of the Curating My Life series, and today I'm going to be talking briefly about curating your relationships. One thing that I think is important to mention before I start talking about main points is that a lot of what I'm saying does not apply to minor children that you're responsible for. What I'm mostly talking about is relationships between adults, because minor children, obviously, if we're responsible for them, then the same mutuality, etc., would not apply in those situations. The first point I'm going to talk about is, and the biggest point, is access. When you look at curating the relationships in your life, primarily we're talking about how much access are you giving someone into your life? How much can that person get a hold of you? How much energy and effort are you putting into that relationship? That's one of the main things you need to look at when we're talking about curation. And one of the main ways that you can determine that is through looking at mutuality. Mutuality is, are you both putting equal time and effort into the relationship? I think it's really important to think about mutuality, because if you're consistently putting more effort into a relationship than someone else is, it's exhausting. It shows that there aren't clear-cut boundaries. It can indicate different types of dysfunction, and it's just a really good gauge for where you stand in somebody's life. For example, if you pull back and stop putting effort in, is that relationship going to fall apart? And if it is going to fall apart, is that something you should continue to keep putting effort into? So one of the books I would recommend is, my book doesn't have a cover, but this is Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nidra Tawwab. I hope I'm saying that right. She wrote this boundaries book, which I've done as a book study with women before, and I think it's full of fabulous information about how to determine what's right, what's normal, what's functional, what's dysfunctional. If you have questions about the mutuality and access in your life, that's a really good place to start. Another piece of this conversation is the idea of codependency, where, we're identifying too much with another person for our acceptance and, just being okay. There's an old classic book I recommend. This is Codependent No More by Melody Beatty. This is a really old copy, so if you order a newer one on Amazon or buy it somewhere, it's not going to look like this, but it is the same book. A lot of therapists recommend that book because it has a lot of really good information about, figuring out if you're having mutuality in your relationships, and then doing what you can control instead of trying to control what the other person is doing. One thing that can be problematic with codependency is that we try to control outcomes by, manipulating or giving more than we should so that we can avoid pain. That's a whole nother can of worms that I'll probably touch on again in the future. But codependency can be really problematic for us because most of the time it leaves people exhausted. So those are just a few things to think about, a few book recommendations. The last thing I'm going to say about this is that you don't owe anyone access to your life. It's very common for people who've been abused, especially by family members, to continue to give access to those people. And that's not always the healthiest thing. Certain degrees of separation are healthy. I would recommend, though, that if you are having issues with codependency and determining how much access you should give people, especially if they've been an abuser towards you, that you seek personal therapy and talk about it with a therapist. But ultimately, just know that you don't owe anyone access into your life. So those are of just a few main topic points I think is worth sharing related to curating relationships. And I hope that you are able to possibly read those books and at least give it some thought. Have a good day.